When the first few specs of the PlayStation 5 Pro were leaked, I saw a comment from a developer who works on, video games, they program. And I didn't want to basically say anything about the dev. Didn't want them to go get people on their Twitter account and all of that. But they said something along the lines of, ladies and gentlemen, if a hardware piece is already bottlenecked by CPU, adding more GPU power is not going to resolve the issues that have been caused by the CPU bottleneck. I think this was a very pertinent claim at the time, but I didn't say anything. I didn't want to point any attention to them. However, that particular claim has come full circle. As Digital Foundry went around analyzing the PS5 Pro, they did mention a few things regarding CPU challenges that the PS5 Pro would hold. Let's go ahead and kind of listen through to that segment of their Sony PlayStation 5 Pro review that they just dropped recently.
But let's move on. Okay, so now we're going to move on to actual game performance and what the new features of the PlayStation 5 Professional mean for all of that. And we're going to kick off with the element that's probably most contentious about it, which is the fact that the CPU isn't really changed at all from the base PlayStation 5. This is slightly problematic because we have found a number of games where there are CPU limitations.
This is the biggest problem with console hardware. Now, if you enjoy consoles, you have to look past this. You got to forget what I'm saying. I'm not attacking you. I'm not saying that you're doing anything wrong. You've already accepted this reality as something that you wish to deal with. But if you're playing on the console from the perspective of you want to see and enjoy more performance, you're pretty much playing on the wrong platform that will allow for you to do so. Not saying that what you're doing is wrong. You just are in a place where you can't do anything about it. And when the CPU limitations were first highlighted by people who were talking about the hardware specs, it was contentious. And people pretended like the GPU, the extra memory and RAM were going to resolve everything. There's a reason why CPU bound or CPU binding in terms of limiting a game is its own reality. Doesn't really matter what else you do. If the CPU is saying, no, I can't do any more, then nothing more is going to be done. Maybe a few things might be enhanced or improved, but the core pieces of the game that actually are tied to the CPU's capabilities are going to be stymied by just the CPU's own bottlenecks.
I'm going to quickly cycle back to Game Boost first of all, because there's actually a mode on PlayStation 5 Pro where developers can actually opt in to having 10% extra CPU clock. And that comes at the expense of a little bit of GPU performance.
You know why? Because they're both sharing resources. Another challenge with a console versus a dedicated CPU GPU. This is why a dedicated, CPU and a 3060 will do some really amazing things with resolution and raw rasterization that the PlayStation 5 Pro can't achieve. Because if you were to get yourself, say, that kind of hardware that could achieve it, it'll be more expensive. That's a CPU, GPU blended, device together. And I'm using the 3060, but we could just use any other, hardware piece or whatever it is, because the dedicated aspects of them can actually separate their tasks and carry them out effectively.
So I tested it in Cyberpunk 2077, which hasn't been patched, but this is the classic Cherry Blossom Marketplace run. It's not quite fully synchronized here, but you can definitely see what's happening. Running around that marketplace in a circle, the frame rate dips beneath 60 frames per second, and the dip is considerably more pronounced on the base model. Still not quite 60 on the Pro model, though, but you can look at the performance differentials there, and it's exactly in line with what you would expect from an extra 10% of CPU clock. So we can confirm that Game Boost isn't just boosting graphics performance. You are getting that 10% of extra CPU clock. The other test I did, and this one is for a Pro enhanced game, and that is Baldur's Gate 3, the classic city run. Act 3, we've got a save that's like 100 hours in, and we can actually do a run through the city. And you can see that on the left there, the base PlayStation 5. On the right is the Pro enhanced version of the game. We're still CPU limited, and you'll see that similar to Cyberpunk, the performance differentials are again in line with a modest bump to CPU clock.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't see where $250 extra dollars or $280, that's the extra 200 they're asking, and then the $80 you're going to spend on a disk drive. I don't see where they're getting it from. If anything, actually no, I don't see how they can justify it. If anything, I think what it is this premium model that they talked about in their leaks from back then. I don't know if you guys remember at the end here, they said Sony Impact after they, confessed that Microsoft and Xbox had decimated them. They said premium sales model is a central approach. This is pretty much the iPhone model, where you buy an iPhone that does the same thing every year with one small improvement for a real heavy premium. This is exactly what PlayStation is doing with the PS5 Pro. There's no other way to talk about this. I mean, look at the change. Look at the delta, guys. This is not a $200 delta. Like right now, okay, my 6750 XT build, the one that I call the console killer, right now it's got a Ryzen 5 5500 inside of it, and it's got a 6750 XT. If I had $280 to spend on that build, and I actually put that $280 into the CPU and GPU, and I split it, half and half, and I go buy me, say I sell my CPU, maybe I sell it to somebody for $60. I lose $30 on it because that CPU was $90 when I bought it. It's $84 right now, right? And I say, okay, let me just add another $100 on top of that $60, $160. And I buy or let me just throw in 50 on it. And I buy myself a 5700 XD, 5700 X3D. And then for the GPU, I have like another, $100 left. I paid $300 and something for it, and I spent $400 and something on there. And I buy myself a 6800 XT or a 7800, 7800 XT with that extra $100. Find a good strong deal on the market, splitting that $280 between those two resources. I am in a whole different world. Like I will enter a new different resolution and a new different area of FPS with that $280 boost. If I were to say sell my items and then regain a little bit of it and then just buy something slightly better. Even if I spent more, I'm still way in a whole different place. And this is why the upgrade on the PCs have always made more sense. And this is, and I'm glad we're seeing this in real time. I'm glad that we're actually taking this, as a case study.
So, Oliver, I think this is probably the primary limitation. I mean, a lot of people are looking at PlayStation 5 Pro thinking, should I give up my PC or should I stick with PlayStation and not move to PC? And I think the defining limitation of the Pro, which we've got to accept, is that even mainstream CPU performance now in the PC space is significantly better than the Zen 2 in the PlayStation 5 Pro. So you've kind of got...
I can end the video there, my dudes. It's not a contest. It's not a competition. And I was saying it to a lot of these folk. I was looking at a lot of these, hyper PlayStation YouTubers saying, do they even realize that by the time the CPUs are actually added to the whole equation, they're going to lose? Like I was looking at that as the biggest fail factor of every argument that was put up. I saw them on Twitter. They were just talking, yelling at everybody on the top of their lungs. And I was saying they are not considering that the CPU is the rattlesnake that they're not paying attention to. It's about to strike. They didn't consider that because the 9800X 3D is coming out. I told y'all AMD cannibalizes itself. It wants to cannibalize the 7800X 3D. It's making a better product. It's going to drive the price of the 7800X 3D down. It's going to then drive further down prices of other mid to almost high range, CPUs down as well, so that its price point can then come in where their original price points were. And now it will be a better product. So what happens now is that now opens up room in the used market, even in the brand new market, because once the used market gets flooded, the new market eventually also has to reduce their prices to compete. And now AMD has cannibalized both itself and the PlayStation 5 and the PS5 Pro. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm making these videos because I really want people to know. I couldn't be bothered. You can play on what you want, but if you're looking at PC and saying that you're gaining better from the console other than your own preference, then I think it's probably because of we're not talking about these things in terms of all of this. And Digital Foundry was, who everybody was citing for this 4070 thing. or whatever it is that was first said, or people were looking at charts and looking at graphs, not realizing that, hey, man, in order for you to see the GPU go crazy, you got to unlock every CPU resource that you can give to it. But in this case of the PS5 Pro, the CPU is limited. And y'all know it's third-party games that get played more. There really isn't much the devs can do here with Baldur's Gate 3 other than go back and start reworking their game. And I doubt they're going to do it for a mid-gen refresh. It's kind of a bust for third-party developers for the most part. Now, PlayStation will probably keep using their games to market it, but it doesn't seem like they have too many this generation anyways. Hey, I had to throw that in there.
Got to accept that limitation with the Pro, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is a mid-gen refresh console, so the emphasis is obviously not on some of those more kind of fundamental areas of the console design, I would say, like the CPU. But
then what else did they eventually go ahead and make a mid-gen refresh for then? If you're not going to enhance your CPU, seeing that most video games these days are CPU bound on the different consoles. What in the world is going on?
Here, I mean, right now, high-end PC CPUs are about twice as fast as the PlayStation 5 Pro's CPU. But I think what we're seeing...
I don't know what he considers high-end. I wouldn't know. He would have to give a CPU SKU for that to say high-end. I don't know.
In most titles nowadays that target console hardware is that basically they are mostly delivering 60 FPS. Like, I don't think we're in quite a cataclysm of games that are failing to hit their performance targets on console. I think most games are basically there, plus or minus some stutters and issues.
Yes! I've been saying this. The PlayStation 5 was already capable to do 60 FPS. In fact, the biggest, revelation to that is the fact that PlayStation's own games on PC require hardware for the minimum and even the recommended specs that are way underpowered than the PlayStation 5 base model. Like the base model, not even the Pro. The PS5 was already doing it with no problems at all. Look at it right here. This is, what game is this? This is Ghost of Tsushima. Look at the recommended specs. i5 8500, Ryzen 5 3600, RTX 2060, or 5600 XT, when what's inside of the PS5 is equivalent to a 6700 non-XT. Now, CPU, we can fight all day, but then you come back to the base requirements, i3 1700 and a GTX 960. The PS5 Pro will eat this thing for... The PS5 Pro wouldn't even want to eat this because it'll just make it more hungry in terms of, say, what you're going to serve it for breakfast. It's a beast of a machine compared to what PlayStation's top games on PC have been asking for, which is why this mid-gen refresh is under question. And I'm going, what in the world is this actually, or who is this actually being made for?
Like that, but obviously in titles like Baldur's Gate, obviously in some more CPU limited games, like you mentioned with Cyberpunk in certain areas, you do run into some problems, and there the PS5 Pro will not save you. It might be good for an extra 10% of performance, but it's not going to. It's not going to save your performance. It's not going to be that kind of generational leap in CPU performance that would actually fix those problems.
Yeah.
So you can't run away from science. To my console brethren, I think this is definitely something that was necessary to happen, and I waited. I was patient because I mean, again, we've done this many times. We've been looking at PC generations in terms of Intel CPUs, and even when AMD kicked off with the Ryzen CPUs, we've been looking at these generations of hardware changes for many years. And the best thing you could always do was just wait. Wait for the data to come out. Wait for the analysis to come out. Don't let anybody sell you anything short. But do you guys not see, though, that a lot of this is coming out basically 24 hours before the console itself gets into the hands of people? The marketing was very clever. But again, a lot of these PlayStation folks, the ones who wanted this for, say, some significant increase in performance, were not interested in listening anyways to anybody who tried to tell them to temper their expectations. Instead, they tried to gaslight them. So I guess if they were wanting performance, then sure, let them see how it goes. Thanks for watching the video, guys. Peace out.